Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our session on Fiori Design, the intersection of material design and the enterprise. My name is Mark Fogle. I'm a senior architect at SAP Labs, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Qiang, Raman, and Sandeep. They're here to keep me honest and also to stick around and answer some questions after the presentation. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So we're going to be talking about first a little bit what's unique about enterprise mobile UI versus your sort of garden variety consumer-based UIs. We're going to talk a little bit about SAP's Cloud Platform Mobile Services. That's our mobile services backend. A little bit about the Cloud Platform SDK for Android in general. Then we'll talk about the Fiori for Android design guidelines, and then we'll dig into the controls. And throughout, I'm going to be interspersing demos where it makes sense. So in terms of what's unique about an enterprise mobile UI, we're really focused on four things. The first of those is configurability. So can the application and the user interface be configured to support the policies of the organization that's using the application? So for example, things like passcode complexity, whether or not a passcode is needed, whether biometrics are allowed. These are all aspects that the organization is going to want to configure for the applications they deploy to their user. The next is customizability. So, we have, as you'll see, our own Fiori Design, which has with it a color palette, but most organizations are going to want to customize that to be the color palette and other visual indicators that are going to cue their users into the fact that they're using a work application and not something that they downloaded from the Play Store. The next item is complexity. So if you think of for example, a consumer relationship management system, it could have potentially millions of records, and each of those could have several dozen attributes. So there's a challenge in presenting that data to the user in a manner that's going to be consumable for them and understandable, but still is going to allow them to accomplish their business tasks. And then finally, consistency. So most mature enterprises have a suite of applications that their users use day to day. So it can sometimes be a challenge for all of those applications to have a consistent look and feel. And that's another thing we're trying to accomplish with our Fiori for Android design. And we're going to look at some examples from SAP's own suite of applications to show just how well or not well we're achieving consistency there. So here's just a brief. We'll do a brief overview of the Cloud Platform Mobile Services. There's quite a bit in here. Again, this group here of application services around OData. If you stick around for the session after this one, that's going to be focused on the OData aspects of the platform. But the platform also has the application services you would normally expect, things like push notification, application lifecycle, exchanging settings for the application, some storage services, things of this nature. And then it's an enterprise, so security is another focus. So things like making sure the authentication is enterprise grade, introducing multi-factor authentication if it's desired, which it should be at this point, and putting encryption and application management on top of that, as well as managing privacy regulations like GDPR, EUDP, or CCSL. And over here on the right are some supportability services for things like analytics, logging, uploading network traces, things like this. And then we get to the Android SDK itself. There's three main components here. There's a wizard, which is the Android Studio plugin. It can generate either Java or Kotlin code. And then based upon the OData metadata, it can generate a set of proxy classes as well as a basic reference UI to this allows the application developers to get up and running quickly with a basic UI that's usable for CRUD operations and just testing out the overall application flow. Then there's the UI components. That's what we're going to spend time talking about here. And then Foundation and OData. Again, OData will be discussed more in the session following this one. So then let's take a look at the Fiori for Android design guidelines, and this link is in the speaker notes for this session. So this is a site, and we work pretty closely with our design team to make sure this reflects the current state of the UI components in the SDK. So this allows any developer or designer who's interested in what we're doing with Fiori for Android to dig into the controls. And the first thing you'll notice here is things like basic controls like buttons. There's not really much variance here from what you would see with material design, and that's because we started with material design. We didn't set out to come up with yet another flavor of Android design. We saw what Google had done with material, and we're pretty pleased with it. So that's the foundation of pretty much everything we do. Let's take a step back for a moment, and what brought us to the need for Fiori for Android design. Fiori itself started out as more of a web design about 7 years ago or so, about the same time as SAP was starting to get serious about mobile applications. So for a while, mobile applications and Fiori kind of were in parallel, but didn't have too many touch points. So you can kind of see that if you look at these are just all the SAP applications currently in the Google Play Store. And a few visual cues here. Anytime you see something with a gold icon, that's an indication that this is definitely pre-Fiori. And sure enough, if we look at some of these applications, the user interface, it's usable, but it doesn't adhere to SAP's latest standards. And here as we progress a little bit, we start seeing, okay, now some of the colors are starting to look a little more in line with what SAP's Fiori design looks like, but still the controls themselves aren't quite there. Now we're getting a little bit closer here, and now here's an application that's fairly recent. It's come out in the last year or so. Now we're still not quite the Fiori design that we'll be taking a look at, but it's pretty close. The colors are here. The layout is looking a little bit more material. So it's starting to look a little bit more like a modern Android app. And finally, and this app we'll be looking at running live. This is a SAP Work Manager, or SAP Asset Manager. And this is using the Android SDK. It also uses another framework from SAP, the Mobile Development Kit, which is SAP's low-code multi-platform development environment, but it's using the UI controls natively underneath. So now you're starting to see what SAP Fiori design looks like in its full realization. So along with the UI controls, there's also some goodies in there for designers. So things like there's stencils, sketch stencils. So any designer who wants to use SAP Fiori design in their own applications has access to the sketch stencils and the Fiori color scheme, as well as the Fiori 72 font. Right, so looking at the different families of controls. We start with the basic UI controls again here. Not much variance from material. In fact, in the case of things like buttons, there's no variance from material at all. The only thing you'll see is we've taken the standard material button and we've applied the SAP Fiori color scheme and the Fiori 72 font. But if you were to look in our SDK, you won't find a button class specific to Fiori. It's just using the standard Android theming to take the material button and give that the SAP look and feel. And similarly with things like basic headers and footers and progress indicators, not any real deviation from material. Next, though, you start getting into some of the more enterprise level controls. So we have what were called headers. So these are for displaying summary level information about an object. I'm just going to bring up, this is the Asset Manager app I was just mentioning. So this is an application that somebody out in the field is using they've got a number of customers that they need to visit to service various items of equipment. So I can see here, and this is using the object cells that we'll get to in a moment. But let's go ahead and drill into one of these orders. So here we see up at the top, this is the standard Fiori object header. This has a couple of aspects. There's the main header for displaying the most important information. What's the part number? What's the status of this part? Here I see an indicator. This is a very high priority order. And if I scroll to the right, I can see some key performance indicators. This one telling me that I haven't taken any of the readings that I need to. It has overall a material feel to it, but we're applying a little bit more structure. So in this way, we can start to achieve some of the consistency I mentioned. So if I pick up a different SAP applications, maybe dealing with CRM orders for the same customers, I would see a similar look and feel. So I'm not retraining my users on every single application. Then we've got the cells. So here, if I look back in the asset management app, I see, I was looking for something with, here's one with 24 objects. So this is all based on recycler view. So we get smooth scrolling of long lists. And here you can see, this is just really a material list, but we've applied some additional structure to it. So for example, there's a column down on the left where we can see, and this is all under application control, we can see whether these individual items have an attachment, what is the priority, whether or not the item has been received. And then if I drill into any of these, again, I see the object header and the item details down below. Next up, we have collections. So this is, we can provide either a carousel or a grid view of different collections. And for this, I'm going to switch over to an internal demo app. So here you can see a carousel that I can scroll horizontally. And if the application designer wants to, they can use instead of a carousel, they can use a grid that scrolls vertically. And they also have the option, if they want to lock the carousel down to just the items that fit on the screen if they want to encourage the user to go to the full list. And then this, if I switch to landscape mode, you can see that displays more items. Then if you're dealing with business data, one thing you'll quickly want to do is work with charts. So here we've built a rather extensive chart library. We're adding new charts to it all the time. But for this, there's actually a pretty good repo out on GitHub. So this SAP has an organization on GitHub, SAP samples, where you can go and find a variety of samples and SDKs across a number of products. You have both mobile and non-mobile. So if you go there and you look for the SAP Fiori chart cards demo application, and again, the link for this is in the speaker notes. You can download this and kick the tires on that. I'll just quickly show what that looks like so you can get a feel for what our charts look like. So here, for example, is current cases across the country, and I can highlight any of these items. And you can see the details changing there at the top. But again, if you're interested, I encourage you to pull that down from our GitHub repo. The next up is maps, and as you might imagine, and here I'm going to go to an emulator. As you might imagine, we support Google Maps. So this is just a demo app, in this case showing bicycle rental stations in the city of Toronto. And at the moment I've got satellite view turned on. I can switch that over to a normal map type. And here you see that the maps framework provides things like clustering. So I don't obviously want to show 500 individual bicycle rental stations around the city of Toronto. I can cluster those together. And as I zoom in, which I can never remember how to do on these emulators, the clusters expand to show more detail. And then if I click on one of these clusters, here again using the object cell, I can see details and then drill into the detail of an individual station and see how many bikes are currently available there. But along with Google Maps, we also provide another mapping provider from a company called Esri. It's based in Silicon Valley, and they use ArcGIS maps. So similar functionality, the application hasn't changed, the data model hasn't changed. I'm just now using a different map provider. So the bulk of the application code doesn't change. I just say, have the application use the Esri Maps provider rather than Google Maps. And as you saw there at the beginning, Esri Maps also has the ability to use offline map tiles. So in cases where my application is dealing with a limited geography and I don't want to incur the bandwidth to be constantly downloading the full map, or in cases operating in a disconnected mode, the offline maps are available. Next, we start getting into some really advanced controls. So things like OCR, and for when I say OCR, I'm not meaning, this isn't general purpose OCR, this is more domain specific OCR. So for example, in an environment where we're scanning member loyalty cards or maybe gym membership cards, the application developer can define the structure of the card. Let me get my phone back up. So they can define the structure of the card. So for example, here in my application, I would say, okay, I've got a membership number that looks something like this. These are the characteristics, and right below that is the expiration date. So as I'm scanning with my camera here, as soon as the membership card comes into view, notice that I pick up the what says member type here, but member number and expiration date. So this allows for rapid scanning of structured information without having to rebuild the model. Underneath, it's just using Firebase ML. So that part is provided by Google, but we put a little structure on that, on top of that. Another thing that comes up in enterprise applications, especially the one we were looking at before, Asset Manager. I'm going to visit a customer. I need to perform some service, and then I'm going to obtain customer sign-off. So I'll ask the customer for their signature. If they don't like the way it looks, they can clear it. Then as soon as I submit, you'll see there's a toast there at the bottom. We've saved an immutable copy of the signature on the device. So here you can see the signature I just made, and then that's watermarked with, this is all under the application's control, but in this case, saying this person signed off on job 1 on December 13th, and the timestamp could be configured by the application to include time and date, or whatever granularity of time is useful for that application. And then there's filtering and sorting, and for this I'll go back to the asset management application. So let's take a look. There's something in here that has, equipment has 130 items. So, if I'm looking for a specific part number, say a ventilation hood, I can scroll through the list to find it, or I can use filtering and sorting. In this case, I can say, just show me the items that are available in Maintenance Work Center 2 and Maintenance Work Center 1. I just want to see the ones that are available, and go ahead and sort that by description. And now that's still quite a few, it's still 82, but I think you get the picture here. I've now filtered down to a subset that I can then easily reset if I want. And then another control, and for this, I'll go back to the demo app. We have a control called timeline, and what this is used for is displaying a sequential time-based list of items. So here, for example, we're just seeing a project schedule, and there's a few design cues here. Anything with a circle is a milestone, anything with a check mark is something to be done. So I can see that either the full detail in a vertical view, or I can see a preview in a horizontal view. So typically you would see the preview used at the object level in an object detail page, and then if you clicked on the preview or the see all button there, you would see the detailed items. Okay, looks like we've got about 5 minutes left. So 5 minutes left in the talk. I wanted to leave some time for questions. So the last item we're going to look at, and this is one of the this is a complex component combining both UI as well as communication with backend services. So you could call this a UI control. You could also call it, as we do, its own flows component. But this This allows the application developer with very little coding on their own beyond configuration to design and implement complex onboarding procedures. So we'll go again to a demonstration app. So this app is just showing all the different flavors of onboarding we have. We're going to be looking at basic onboarding here. And if you look under the covers, there's a few items of configuration we need to deal with here. There's a server URL, there's an ID that tells us which application we're connecting to. There's quite a few parameters in here, but what we want to do is provide as few places for the end user to kind of go astray. So one capability we provide is the ability to capture all that generic onboarding information that doesn't change from user to user, that can be captured in a QR code. So I'm going to go ahead and start my onboarding here. Oops, I need to reset it actually. Let's go ahead and start the onboarding. I could either use my email if my IT department has enabled that as an option, or I can use a QR code. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the QR code. And then as that comes up into my field of view, you can see the server address there. It's successfully read the QR code, and it's a little blurry there, but you can probably see this is not something you would want. There it goes. This is not something you would want the user entering manually. So I'm going to take them to the next step, which is to enter their username. So this will vary from user to user. I must have entered something wrong there, or maybe I double tapped. Let's start over again. So onboarding. There we go. Now it's gone to the backend service. It's pulled down the application policy. My IT administrator has said the policy is that we're going to require 5-digit passcodes. Biometrics are enabled, but I'm going to skip that. I will consent to analytics data collection as well as crash report collection, and now I'm in my application. Now the next time I launch that, so let me clear that from memory and relaunch. It's just going to ask me for my passcode. Now to show you a little bit behind the scenes, it would be good to have some actual code in this talk. So this is how I configure that flow. So it's just a matter of saying I want to have the basic flow. I provide a state listener to listen to the states of the flows as it goes through that onboarding, and then an action handler to handle any application-specific actions. Now, if I wanted to, actually, we missed the EULA there. I think I forgot to rebuild this application. So I think the version of the application we're actually running now has this additional exclude EULA option in it. But if I go ahead and rebuild it without that and relaunch it on my device, and reset the state now as part of the onboarding process, I should present the user with a EULA. Yep, so we missed that the first time because I'd gotten ahead of myself and turned that option off. So just to wrap up here, here's, again, all of the links for these are in the speaker notes in the talk platform. So the session following this one, following the break at 11:20, will be designing offline applications for the enterprise, and then after the lunch break at 1 o'clock, we'll have a roundtable with myself and all the colleagues from both sessions to get into some more detailed Q&A. We have links for, if you're interested in learning more about the Android SDK, a learning journey, as well as some interactive tutorials, and then links to download the Android SDK and sign up for a trial version, a developer version of the cloud platform, which will let you set up a test environment for doing end-to-end testing and development. So with that, thank you, and can now open up the session for questions. All right, I think there's some way to sort this. Okay, so it looks like the top question is, can you please give an example of a real-life use case where Fiori controls have been better than materials controls? I don't know if I would say, I don't think there's cases where we think we're better than material. It's just cases where maybe we add more structure on top of material. So, you know, going back to the presentation, I don't know if I can go back or not. Yeah, so if you look in our UI components, certainly when it comes to basic components, we don't think we're better than material. We're just using what material's already provided, and if possible, using the actual material components provided by Google. You know, so things like chips, checkboxes, these are all just basic materials. So it's only in the areas where material doesn't provide something that we're looking for, like an implementation of a collection or a data table or the object header, where it's something enterprise specific. That's where we diverge from material. So I wouldn't say there's any cases where we've actually gone and said, okay, we know how to do something better than material, so this is our replacement for something that material has already done. And the next one, can we create custom controls by using extending Fiori UI? Yeah, I'd say one area where this would come into play is in the cells. So we have had internal customers. So we talked about the things like the object cell. A key value cell. So the cells are actually, there's an abstract class here that some of our internal customers have extended. But usually, and then there's also the ability to style the controls. But the controls themselves haven't been really designed with extensibility in mind. But yeah, good question. We're always interested in exploring ways to enhance the usability of the SDK. So that's certainly something we can consider. Can we use Fiori controls but change the color theme? Definitely. So if we were to dig into, let me see if I can just bring up some of the SDK itself. So if you look in actually a more interesting thing to look at is our demo app. So we provide the Fiori theme, and if you just use that unmodified, then you get all the Fiori colors that you saw in the various demos. But beyond that, all of the individual controls are stylable. So if you wanted a entirely different color scheme at the top, you would just extend the Fiori theme, and then you could start overriding the individual colors for the individual controls, or you could override the items for individual controls if you want. But yeah, that's certainly something that our customers ask for and expect. So we've gone out of our way to make that easy. What is the release cadence for Fiori? Are components versioned independently? At the moment, it's pretty much lockstep. The SDK is versioned as a whole, and it tends to follow a 3 to 6 month cadence with patches in between to address issues that come up, and those tend to occur about once a month or so, or more frequently if a high priority issue comes up. And then the only remaining question is, how do you define which controls should be enhanced using Fiori? This really, in most cases, this is coming from our customers. We work with a number of internal teams to SAP, and then we're starting to get requests from outside the company as well for service partners that are starting to use the SDK in their development. And we really, we try to be as customer driven as possible. So, for example, if an external or internal or external customer says, charting's great, but I really need this chart, then a chart that we aren't currently implementing, then we would move that up to the top of our backlog and try to target that for a near-term release. But yeah, it really tends to be driven by our customers. Okay. It looks like we are out of questions. So thank you everyone for attending. And stick around after the break for the offline OData session.